Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to invite SJ Anderson on my channel. And welcome, SJ. It's really exciting to be able to talk to you about these unbelievable times that we're living through. What I really enjoy about your work is that, like me, you emphasize a lot of our spiritual growth in the process of understanding the global situation and how we can all sort of find our way through it as well, personally. And I'm really curious to hear more about your astrological beginnings. I always like to know how people kind of fell into the astrological black hole.
Yes.
And so please introduce yourself a little bit. I know some of my audience knows you already really well, and they're thrilled that you're here as well. So thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you for having me, Susan. Real honor to be with you. And I was just thinking here as I talk about my own journey, I'm like, oh, I've talked about that so many times. I'm like, I want to know about your journey a little bit too. So maybe, I don't know, I'm sure your audience is very informed with where you've come from in your history. But just to say for me, I always think about astrology as something I had no idea I would even be involved in it until I was about 35, I think. So it was something that really was an oblique thing that kind of came and intervened in my life and just sort of grabbed me and just put me into astrology in a very strange way, actually. I had been a tarot student and I'd always been a spiritual person. So I have long histories of that I won't really go into at all. But I do think about my role as an astrologer as containing all of what came before in terms of my spiritual preparation for it, because it is such a spiritual thing. But the short of the more astrologically focused side of it is that I've been a tarot student probably 5 years and quite serious. And in that system, we work with astrological symbols as correspondences. But I didn't realize that astrology was this, as you say, hole you can fall into, and it's way more than tarot. I mean, it's the tarot is like, okay, Aries as an archetype, and you think about the Emperor card, and but what happened is I met an astrologer, and I met who is now the president of ISAR, Jen Zart, Dr. Jen Zart, and we met in person at a group event that a lot of our mutual friends. We all went to a festival together, and we rented out a big house for a weekend, and I was from Texas and Austin. This was in Boise, Idaho. So I went to this, I traveled a long way and just a few little conversations with her. I mean, we weren't even talking a lot during that weekend, but she kind of turned me on to the idea that astrology is a highly advanced thing. And you know what attracted me the most to it was that I realized the history of all of those symbols I'd been learning in tarot. There was actually thousands of years of history. And so I realized, oh, wow, in order for me to understand what I've been studying, I actually have to go back to the very beginning and try to learn how this all came into being. And then once I did that, then I'm down. I just had the pill. I was astro pilled, as they say, and the rest is history. But it's been my great obsession. Literally, I went home from that, and I went to my. I mean, I marked my birth as an astrologer from that weekend, and it just turned on and has never turned off from that point. So it's fascinating how life can change so fast, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's it. I think also probably you can find somewhere in your transits around that time why that happened. And I'm gonna wonder if Uranus played a role in there somewhere. That was Uranus that flipped me and from being what I thought was a consumer of astrology to an actual astrologer.
Yes. I will say this, in my solar return, which was that weekend, I had a Mercury Cazimi with my son that weekend on
Right.
the sun. So
And of
I
course,
definitely think the
Mercury,
Merc.
for those listening, is the planet originally of astrology as well. So I had Uranus crossing my Mercury.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Uranus was in Aries during that time, so that's where it all was, but it was a
Oh,
few
yeah.
degrees later. So it was close
Okay.
and in the mix for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah. Well, and you're doing very well with it. So somehow I think also these things are divinely inspired. We find our feet, as it were. So
Yes.
fantastic. What I thought we would do is try and parse out what's coming ahead because we're in a place where we don't even really know what's going on today. It's so hard to figure out with all these things changing. But let's just try and make sense of it as we go forward. And we're going to leave a bit of March behind because I'm sure we're going to individually do a lot of work on that as well, the different things that are coming up. And we're going to just jump ahead a little bit to the equinox. So I'm going to share my screen and bring up the equinox chart. And let's see if we can find something in that will give us some clues as to how things are going forward. Um, hang on just a sec while I find it. And of course, now I can't find it. It's
I
there
can.
somewhere.
Okay.
Hmm. Hang on just a minute. I'll just find it here.
I have it right up too. I mean,
Oh,
I
would
know it's
you?
like,
Yeah,
yeah,
let
I'll
me
just share it
share.
right now. Here, let me share it.
How do I think I need to give you permission to do that. Is that right?
Okay, let me see. I think I can share. I think you may have sharing is not turned on. I think if you go down to participants and there's a little dot there, an arrow that you can click and it allows you to do it there, I think.
So,
But
okay.
if not, that's okay. I know I was like, why don't you just share? But then I have it up and I'm looking at it as we're talking about it.
And the crazy
So
thing is, I'm pretty convinced I had it up myself. So
here, I'm
let
going to put
me,
send request. Send
yeah,
request to.
perfect. Yeah,
Okay.
good. We'll
Okay.
figure it out. We'll figure it out.
Okay.
Everybody can go grab a cup of tea while we figure this out.
Well, here it is. I
All
think I
right.
got it here, right? There we
Super.
go.
So I'm
So,
going to stop my share and you jump
okay.
in.
There it is. And I just
Okay,
have it
wait,
like
hang
you.
on. I'm not
Okay.
seeing your screen, so let's just double check. Maybe
Okay.
I've cut you off. Is that what's happened?
Mine
No.
says that you are screen sharing. So
Okay, let's see
the
with you
audience,
now.
yeah. Can you see
Okay.
it? Are you not able to see my
No, I'm
screen?
only
Okay.
seeing you.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Wow. Let me stop share and try
Wait, hang
again.
on. I've just flipped over to
Okay.
screen share. So I think this is, you see, I've got to manage this a little bit better.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm learning as we go here. So you are now screen sharing. We can see your screen,
Okay.
and we're good to go.
And you see it here, the chart then, and
Yeah, so what we're seeing is the big screen is showing your Aries Ingress chart, and there's a tiny little frame for the two of us.
beautiful. I was just going to say to clarify, I use Universal Time as well, and I always use
Okay,
Iceland because it's never changing. It's always on Universal Time. So
that's handy. Yeah,
yeah, that's what you're seeing here. I don't have an ascendant or midheaven because we're not really grounding into local space
right.
as we delineate this. Maybe usually with this kind of chart, people might want to put it in their capital city or the capital city of the country in question to really analyze that country. And
Hmm.
so we might want to do some of that. But if we're talking about it more generally here at the outset, maybe there is some utility in that too. What do you think?
Well, let's start with the general because
Okay.
that's going to affect the kind of the global situation anyway, and all of us, even individually, and we'll see where it goes. And we can throw the different charts up for different countries as well. So let's start with this one.
Okay. Wonderful. Shall I,
Yeah,
what do
so
you think?
well,
Just jump in
yeah,
or
I'd
what do
like
you, yeah.
to hear from you, and I'll see
Okay.
if there's anything I'd like to add. I'm just looking the thing that's most striking about this chart, as so many of our historical events that are being called in this year, so much Aries going on. I mean, it's always, of course, an Aries ingress,
Yeah.
but this is huge.
Yeah.
With Mercury on the North Node now direct, right?
Yes. Yes.
Oh no, is
Amazing.
yeah, Mercury's direct
Yeah.
at this point, yeah.
Direct right with the North Lunar Node, right? In the same degree, 8 degrees of Pisces. Yeah. Well, I'll just jump in then. I'll say, I mean, one of the things that I'm about to release a video about, it's kind of about this, I talk about it here, is that, and we're shifting off a little bit to maybe a sub area. I guess first I'll just say, look at Saturn and Neptune together. This would be the Aries ingress that would include of any Aries ingress before, like so last year or after next year. This being, I think, as closely in orb as they'll be. We would have to check next year. They may be somewhat close, but likely not this close. I actually haven't looked at that. Whether it's this year and next year or just this year, I mean, we're talking about the Saturn and Neptune energy being incorporated here this year, and
Can I just
that,
ask you what
yeah,
orb
go
you
ahead.
give for the because I there's a lot of difference between astrologers as to what orb is a good one for these outer planets.
I work with something called co-presence mostly, which is the same sign. Though when I do look at intensification, I will just have a continuum. So I don't really end the communication between the planets until the signs are separate. I've
Okay.
learned that that's just when you look at cycle work with that, there's stark examples of like things ending only when they leave. And the best example I think is 1917 through 1919 when one of the best examples that's recently on my mind when Saturn and Neptune conjoined at 4 degrees of Leo in 1917 during World War One. When Saturn finally left Leo in 1919 in the summer, that's when it all ended. And it took that long. It took armistice was in 1818, November 11th, right? Or I think
Yeah,
that's the right date.
absolutely. Yeah.
And then the League of Nations was founded next year in 1919. So really those events of Saturn, Neptune, which I think of as creating a new world, took were clearly defined by that co-presence energy. Now, 1917 included a lot of interesting stuff too that was independent of that wider orb that one might use. But that's just an example. I like to think about them in the same sign as still blending, as still relying on the same ruling planets, as still expressing with the same archetypes. And so they're kind of a pair, or in this case, the a quadra, a quad a team there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that would be what
Well,
that would be what I would say. If I didn't use that model, I would probably use Tarnas. I think he uses
yeah.
10 degrees or 15 sometimes, depending on his analysis. But 10
Yeah.
feels right, as it's also the decans. You
Yeah,
can see there the
absolutely.
10
Yeah,
degree.
yeah. No, I think
Um,
that's good. I think also your notion of the co-presence is really valid. That's how Indian or Vedic astrology works as well. If the planets are in the same sign, they're conjunct. So, and I think there's a lot of validity there. Although I also do overlapping signs as conjunctions because I go by degrees as well. So, but what is interesting about this and the 1917 component, we even go back to 1916. That's the Sykes-Picot Agreement
mm,
that has got us into today's mess. And for those who are listening, it's the agreement between the secret agreement between Britain and France that actually laid out what they would do to the Ottoman Empire if they should win the war, or if let's say if the Ottomans lost the war, which indeed they did. And then the following year was the Balfour Agreement in
yes.
1917. And what's interesting here is you mentioned 4 degrees of Leo, and that's where we're going to have a lot of activity. We're going to have Jupiter there
Yes.
this year. We're going to have Mars hitting that. We're going to have a lot of stuff going through Leo, of course, this year because of the ingress of Jupiter after the 30th of June. So
Yep.
it's striking to me that 4 degrees is already here in the Aries Ingress chart.
Yeah.
And that's where Neptune will be, right, in July. So
Yes.
fun times.
Fun times. Fun times.
Yeah. So, okay, carry on. I interrupted you there, but I
No,
think it's helpful.
please. And that's fascinating. I hadn't even have thought about Sykes-Picot in this context, but of course it's highly relevant given everything we've seen in the 20th century and then through the present. Balfour is the one I've been more focused on because it's so relevant to today's events, I think,
Yeah. Well,
given
just if I can
yeah.
interject just
Mhm,
about the
mhm.
Sykes-Picot, I do have charts for that as well, but it also included Russia. And that's
Oh,
what's even more interesting because the Brits and the French were sneakily kind of dividing things up. And then Russia had to be in agreement just to allow that to happen. They
mhm,
were in agreement, and they even got a part of Armenia and Constantinople or something. And then the Italians got a little bit of it. So everybody getting a little action. And then it
mhm,
was in 1917, I think it was, that the Bolshevik revolution
yes.
happened. And the Bolsheviks actually, because it was the Tsarist Russia that agreed to this division of the Ottoman Empire. But then the Bolsheviks revealed that after the Communist Revolution, they revealed the agreement.
Mhm.
And that's when the world found out, hey, wait a minute, what's
Yes.
going on?
Yes.
And then the story unfolds from there with a lot of betrayal of the Arab countries. And
Yes.
so it's, I think, a really interesting period of time. If we look at that 3 year sort of 2016 to 20, sorry, 1916 to 1919,
Mhm.
including the beginning of the League of Nations, there's so many things that are being impacted today by those decisions, including the Balfour Agreement, which is impacting us now.
Yes.
So
And
it makes the charts just pop even more, in my opinion.
100%. I just, I can't help myself. I want to maybe get up and start actually putting those dates in, if that's okay. I can do
Sure,
this very
yeah, yeah.
quickly because that, my mind's already like, okay, what's going on in 1916? happening here. I think I'm
Yeah,
trying to
I'll,
get the
I'll tell
best.
you the Sykes-Picot date. You can create the chart since you're
Okay.
sharing, but I'll give you the
Okay.
Sykes-Picot date here.
Okay. Let me
Um,
just, I'm trying to get, figure out the best. I have all kinds of pages and there's some that
mm,
are majorly, not as good here for sharing. Let me see here. I'm gonna
okay.
go to maybe basic, maybe in my basic tab. That would be a good one here to go. I think this is a good one here. All right, let's start sharing this, and I
So
hope.
the Sykes-Picot, did you want the Sykes-Picot agreement date?
Yeah,
Should I put over
let's
that?
go
So
there. Yeah,
you can use May 16th of 19 what did we say? 1970?
16,
16,
16.
16,
Yeah.
yeah. And there's
Okay.
another date of November, but the original agreement was between the 9th of May when there was a first reception of the proposal from the French. So Picot was the French diplomat and Sykes is the British diplomat. And that was the 9th. And you'll notice that there's some really interesting aspects with Mars there. And then the 16th was when the agreement was settled. So the response came from the UK and they had come to this agreement. And so 16th of May of 2016.
Okay.
And that chart itself also really speaks loudly to this time. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I just see Neptune at 0 degrees of fire just having entered. That's, we
yeah,
get this resonance here, Jupiter and Aries. The fire element is something that's so much a part of this moment and this summer with Jupiter coming into Leo and the eclipse in Leo. It can be very change inducing. I mean, it's the nature of the element. And of course, Aries, the cardinal fire sign, is definitely initiating into a new world. But the whole element is about, passion and excitement and outer world. We call it a so-called masculine sign where you're out kind of burning and shining light. And it doesn't surprise me at all that there is Jupiter and Aries in this chart, but also that the 4 degrees Saturn Neptune conjunction in 1917 would include a war during that time,
absolutely. And we've
like
got
we
a
have
trine
now.
from Jupiter in fire, Jupiter and Aries to Mars in Leo. So that's um, that's also quite incitement to action,
Yeah.
you can say.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, so this is again we're kind of we're redefining history in so many ways in this year.
Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, and I mean, that is, there's just so many layers here, as I think your audience probably knows, and as you're certainly and keenly aware of this moment we're in. And setting aside that Aries ingress, I mean, for a second, I mean, people need to understand, and I think I want to understand every day is Pluto in Aquarius, Uranus in Gemini, and Neptune in Aries. All of those shifts in their own right have been quite change inducing and reality altering.
Yeah.
And that's part of this year when you go to that July moment that we've been talking about. This is the other thing I wanted to get up when you mentioned that 4 degrees in July, because it's not just Pluto in Aquarius and Jupiter in Leo. It is, I think you were using the 17th here. When does it's the
I was
18th?
using the 20th because then it
Okay,
starts to perfect. It's a
there it
partile
is.
formation then with Jupiter.
Okay, let me
But
get
it
pull my
actually is it's in orb for July, basically.
Yeah, and there is the application of Jupiter and Pluto, and I guess Jupiter enters the fifth degree or 4 degrees right around the 18th, 19th, something like that. But I mean, there's 4 degrees Jupiter in Leo, 4 degrees Pluto in Aquarius, 4 degrees Uranus in Gemini, and 4 degrees Neptune in Aries. So that 4 degrees is a highly important degree, and I haven't thought about this yet. So this is why it's so great when you talk with astrologers, isn't it?
Yeah,
But there is the Saturn Neptune conjunction of 1917 right there.
100%. And
Wow.
that's why this whole Balfour Declaration, but also the Sykes-Picot, which actually is, you have to see it as a continuum of
Yeah.
philosophy or a continuum of the colonial mindset in those days. Um, this is all, Balfour was like the foreign minister of the UK at that time under the new government because Sykes-Picot was under the previous government and then the government shifted by the end of that year. And so by the time we get to the Balfour Declaration, It's just more of the same. It's just now a new theme, and that includes our friends, the Rothschilds, because it was done on behalf of the Rothschild, was it Nathan Rothschild, and that is was for the Zionist movement. And now what we're, in my way of seeing this, is we're seeing complete and total transformation of what we can consider the Zionist movement, because it's more than just those geopolitical stories, but it's and here's that Saturn Neptune thing, especially at zero Aries, it's that sense of the ideology that goes with that. Because Saturn Neptune is not just the dissolution of the material, but it's also it's a revision of ideology each time. So we're in this a flipping of the script, I think, of what has been basically the 20th century and now the 21st story. And I'm just noticing in your chart here on the 19th of July, which is something that doesn't show up on the 20th when it gets tighter, but
Mhm.
it's still very relevant. So by the 18th, 19th, the moon is in Libra, and it seems on
Yes.
the 19th that it passes that fourth degree just
Yes.
around lunchtime,
Mhm.
universal time, and that is a massive time trigger. So again, that can be a really interesting thing to look at. And we'll only know when we go through it, but I think we're in for a big shift this summer.
100%. And I wanted just to come back because I know I've been talking about, as we alluded, exchanged earlier, I was interested in that earlier time on the 14th. And by the
Hmm.
way, I think we're in a window all of July, whether
Yeah.
it's, these things can happen sometimes, when things are separating or applying, or it's
Yeah.
not quite, it's sometimes hard to know the exact moment. I know a lot of our colleagues will predict like that day of the exact moment and things, but
But and
I
also, as you mentioned, once Jupiter goes in, because you're looking at the sign. So if we take
Yep.
Jupiter in Leo as just
Yes.
Jupiter in Leo, that's the 30th of June. So
Yes.
we're really in the thick of it.
Yes. But I just want to say the reason why I've been focused on this is that you have the Uranus Neptune sextile, and you see how that will begin separating on the 15th.
Okay.
You can't really see it here, but there it is, right? The hour of the 15th. So you can, I can change the aspect points. Let me see if I can select something better. Tarnus. So now I've got, there's the cradle or the
Mm,
basket,
mm,
as they say, and
mm,
out on this day, the 15th, you can see one edge of it will become dotted, meaning there's a separation. And that's why I
mm.
had focused a little bit more on that, on this time, a little bit earlier in July. But as you mentioned, the moon hitting 4 degrees, this is also the time where the moon will be, oh, sorry.
I know I do that all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
It's like, stop.
But here's the moon at 4 degrees of Leo on the 15th. And then, of course, the next time it's at 4 degrees of masculine will be that Libra moon you've keyed in on. So I think
Right.
both probably are interesting times, whether you're the 15th or the 19th,
But also
20th.
look at Venus now. I mean, this is it's insane. Venus has just passed that 4 degree around that
Yeah,
14th of
yeah,
July mark as well. So
yeah.
I mean, wow, it's just a phenomenal chart. It's a for people who are watching, not particularly familiar with astrology, these configurations are extremely rare because we're talking not about the faster moving planets, but about the slower moving planets that are coming into this alignment. And it's such a rare thing for them to be in such an open formation like this. You can get clusters and conjunctions and things a little bit more frequently, but this is an extraordinary pattern. And then
Yes.
each time these slightly faster moving planets move through, they're triggering the bigger pattern to create an even bigger pattern.
Yes.
So it's phenomenal times to be alive. Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's
and
keep going.
yeah, extraordinary is a word. I would bring in one other quick thing here, and we can maybe go back to Aries Ingress chart, but look at 4th of July,
Oh, yeah.
Mars 4 degrees, and Mars having just conjoined Uranus. And
Yeah.
so this is
And
another,
and square the nodes.
and square the nodes.
Yeah.
And so July, I made a video at the beginning of the year. I was like, okay, the two peaks of 2026. And I said February, July. That was like the point of that whole video because
Yeah.
February's eclipse season with Saturn Neptune, but July includes, and we can come off of this, but I mean, there's way more than we've just talked about in terms of perfected aspects in July with the outer planets. Uranus will perfect, just to say it briefly, sextile to Neptune, trine to Pluto, Jupiter perfects opposition to Pluto, sextiles and trines, like all of that perfects in July. The list of the perfected outer planet aspects is like 10 or more, just those five. So it's going to be a wild, wild month and an exciting month. And I think people are saying, well, what might it mean? I'm really thinking and I'm hoping that it means that we can step into some kind of new collective energy and maybe we can get beyond this crisis sooner. And of course, Andre Barbault, you spent time in France.
I
Are
live in
you?
Belgium,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
I'm currently in Spain, but I'm 36 years in Belgium, so I've studied with a lot of French astrologers. Um, yeah, there's a lot of optimism in terms of his interpretation.
Yes.
I hesitate.
Yeah.
There's a part of me that's afraid to be optimistic, but also, these were his calculations based in the 70s up to the 80s and into, I think that the latest one was like the early 2000s before he passed. And, or was it mid? Yeah, it was around the Pluto-Uranus square. We've now seen a whole different kettle of fish since then. The world is really different in the last 12 years. So again, I cling to the hope.
Yes.
Yeah,
And I just bring it up because I think in times like these, having some hope is can be useful as a strategy for day-to-day living, and having some astrological hope can justify that. And anything to justify hope, I think, is a great thing to be at least including in the mix of processing mentally, emotionally, spiritually.
yeah.
I think when we get to this moment in July, and if we get, and we get into August, September, Venus retrograde, and this processing time at the end of the year, I'll be very curious to see how hopeful I'm still, having lived through this.
Right.
If there hasn't been some very clear, okay, this was the release from the crisis, and we're clearly on the other side. If that hasn't arrived, then I'll throw this out, and we'll just kind of all say, well, Barbeau, you can't get perfect all the time, and
Well, I
um,
think maybe the other thing is that there's a couple of things that come to mind. First, that this configuration repeats in 2027, not with Jupiter, but
yes,
at 6 degrees. So then we move into the sixth degree. But the other aspect of this is that we have to broaden our sense of what we can consider to be an improvement, because often if we break it down, and today we've got this Jupiter stationing at 15, it's heavy this whole week, it's at the degree of its station direct. And Jupiter in Cancer is very nationalistic, right? It's very,
yes,
very much about, my team and this kind of thing, my family, my team, my
yes,
kids.
oh
And
yes,
and this might cloud our assessment of what change is necessary. And if I come back to those older charts of whether it be Sykes-Picot or if it's the Balfour Declaration or the League of Nations or whatever Bolshevik revolution of the late teens of the last century, there's a massive shift that happened. And I think what can be comforting is power shifts. There's now new balance of power, new spheres of power, but it's not like everything is wiped out. It's just that we have to adapt to the new thing. And I think as long as people can hold that space of recognizing that when we talk about the decline of empire, it doesn't mean they disappear. If you look at, the Roman Empire, everybody still visits Rome today. Everybody still hangs out in Italy, the Greco-Roman Empire, or whatever, even the Ottoman Empire. The remnants of it are still very, very much part of our modern times. It's not going anywhere. It's different. That's the thing I think that can provide a little bit of space for interpreting how we fit into all of the change. So as long as we can, in a way, soften that edge of nationalism and this need for things to look our way, we can be more graceful as we go forward in these bigger changes. And again, it's triggering those big changes that our great grandparents or our grandparents lived through, and they were alive long enough to have us. So there we are. So,
yes, yes.
failing a
Yeah,
nuclear disaster, but hopefully
yeah.
the adults will prevail.
I hope so too. And yeah, I think that's very wise. Life goes on, the
Yeah.
Beatles idea. And
Yeah.
we live day to day too. And we have a conversation like this and we're very keyed into this geopolitical side of the astrological world, but we have a personal side and we all have things to care for and center. And I think it's good to keep that in the mix as well. I mean, we can't only be thinking about the news or our lives won't function and our health will diminish. And
Yeah,
real quick, I just wanted to say this, Susan. This is amazing. I hadn't seen this yet, which is Ceres is in 6 degrees.
it's
Ceres, the
fabulous.
dwarf planet, is there. And so it's almost like a second basket.
Isn't that awesome? I don't actually use Ceres. I need to start using these things more. It's just I got into this habit, but that's amazing to see that.
Yeah, the
Um,
the thing about Ceres is that it was Pluto before Pluto. In
yeah,
1801, it was the new planet, and it was assigned that role that Pluto then was assigned in the 20th century. So it is a very important planet, and even in the conscious history of astronomy and astrology. And so look at that. Wow, I'm gonna have to.
awesome.
I'll mention you. I'm gonna make a whole video about this soon, and I'll just say, yeah, Susan. You
But
know,
this is it's just extraordinary how these things keep popping. And I'm sure if we come back and look at this in 10 days' time, we'd find more things that
yeah,
keep popping. But
yeah,
just so we can help people understand Ceres, or at least my people, because I don't talk about it,
yep,
the way I understand Ceres is it's Demeter, isn't it? It's another way of calling. It's about our capacity for nourishment and connection
yes,
and food, literally food related things. Do you have
yes.
other keywords for Ceres?
My keyword is just harvest. I mean, so it's
Okay.
food related, but it's feminine. So it's like mother harvest energy. I consider it in the same category as the moon,
Hmm.
Venus, Ceres, Black Moon Lilith has a whole nother side of that.
Hmm.
But it's in the grouping of planets that are the mother energy. And so having a kind of a mothering or a nourishment or a nurturing component added here in 2027 is very useful, I think. And I think we're going to need that, in my
Yeah.
opinion. We're going to need where are we after this great tribulation of 2026?
The one thing that I see that might worry my sort of skeptical brain is
Mhm.
that Ceres is approaching the South Node,
Yeah.
and the South Node is approaching Ceres, and then it's squaring Chiron. So then it's kind of like, well, how does that transpire then? Because would that mean, because of course South Node can mean subtraction and loss and letting go and
Yes.
release and not having, not getting, not
Yes.
just not.
Yes.
And then if we're talking about food and food supplies, does that mean that we're now struggling? Because I know, for example, Ukraine holds some insane amount of the available carbohydrates, let's say,
Yeah.
of the global trade. And
Yeah.
this is a quagmire that still has not been resolved. It's ongoing.
Yes.
And and also the just the overall shipping and trade situation that has been quite literally blown up in the past week
Yes.
since the Mars square Uranus situation and the that interposition of the eclipses. So then again, I go back and I flip back into the anxiety
Mhm.
aspect of it and say, "Oh my God, does this mean we don't have food?"
Yeah.
But who knows? Who knows? These are just symbolic potentials.
I wanted to add to that though, but I think Chiron and Taurus, which is a part of the mix, this is Great Depression. I mean, not to fearmonger or anything, but it arrives here in August. It enters Taurus, Chiron, then it'll go back. It's very quick this year.
I
But
think
I
it's
do think
June through
oh,
September. Oh,
June through
yeah,
September.
for the
Okay.
first degree, yeah, into the just 0 to 1 degree. Yeah,
Yes. Okay. Thank you for that. But I do think this year we have to be aware that there could be economic downturn, and I do
yeah,
think it's worth contemplating how do you thrive in a time when you have economic downturn. So we have
yeah,
some of us have been around during times like these, like the Great Financial Crisis, 2008, 2009
yeah,
or before. And it would behoove us all to get lean and learn how to live simply and keep our, this is a great thing to be thinking about. Having Ceres in the mix in 2027, maybe that's when they release the, AI digital currencies and the UBI or whatever they'll do in a
yeah,
response.
yeah, yeah,
And maybe that's how those two things can play together. There is some crisis, but yet there's now the release of kind of the new abundance that could be coming online. Barbault thought it was some kind of new abundance. I mean, it's
yeah.
kind of implied when you read that paragraph when he wrote about it.
Yeah,
There was an
it's for sure.
abundance.
He was calling this like a rebirth of civilization, and I can actually see that. I just we have to remember how painful birth, I've had
Yeah. Yes.
three of them, and birth is not an easy process, and it can be quite ugly, and then you get the beautiful result.
Yes.
But so just again, for people to philosophically hold that space for this particular configuration, 2025, 6, 7,
Mm.
being part of the heavy, ugly part of birth,
Yeah.
so that we get a beautiful baby coming thereafter. I was in India a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago, and the master of the place where I was staying, the spiritual master, had he was talking about this period in time from the Indian perspective, and he's not an astrologer. He's an enlightened master. And he
Mm.
said, this is exactly aligning with the astrology. He said, these years between 24 and 6 are the heavy years, and then things start to lighten up after 2027, and things renew in his way of looking at it after 2030.
Mhm.
So I found that really extraordinary because he wasn't looking at astrology, he was capturing what he is connected to, whatever that is cosmically, and I found that that gave me that little dose of hope again.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm noticing in your chart here for 20th of June,
Mhm.
um, and we will, I promise to everybody listening, we will finally get back to the Aries
Yeah.
Ingress, but I think
Yes.
this is
Yes.
so exciting. We have Ceres on Uranus at this point, and then she's in a sextile with Venus.
Mm.
Venus is applying to
Yeah.
a sextile. So this is also a theme, isn't it? It's a major theme of
Yeah.
now this year.
Oh yeah. And I think I don't know. I think coming back a little bit, if you want to come back to the Aries Ingress, shall we? Because I think this is relevant to as we get
Sure,
closer
yeah,
here.
we'll just keep flipping back and forth and I'll
Yeah.
put timestamps so people can navigate. Yeah.
Perfect, perfect. But it's that Mercury stationing direct. I always key people into that because it really gives us a sense of kind of forward movement now. And Mercury will station retrograde in 29 June. So from now until then, there is a sense of maybe getting some forward movement. We'll have Venus and Taurus. We'll have Venus conjoining Jupiter. There's actually a lot to like in this next 3 months of some of the best astrology we'll have this year and some of the great, best opportunities. And how might that fit into chaos? Well, a lot of us may be having to make changes or maneuvers here to roll with these changes to prepare for the rest of the year or 2027. And I think there's support for that is just how I would say it. And coming back to Aries Ingress, you have the cardinal energy. This was the thing I started with. And then I said, well, let's talk about Saturn, Neptune. But what I wanted to really start with was that Jupiter's in the cardinal sign and
Yeah.
Saturn is in the cardinal sign. So from this ancient perspective, it's very initiating.
Mhm.
And the last time this happened was 2020 when you had the Aries Ingress and Jupiter and Saturn were in Capricorn, and you saw how big the year was to change the geopolitical reality. The other example, and I talk about this in a video I'm about to release, is 2011 when Osama bin Laden was captured, and there was a lot of shifts in the geopolitical definitioning around that time. So
Yeah.
I think there's a new sense of new worlds. Let me just put it that way, just from the
And
Jupiter. Yeah.
to that point in the cardinality, we also have a Saturn that's it's in its fall, and Jupiter is exalted. So it gives us more of a hopeful flavor. It gives us a potential, let's say, that in the 2020 configuration, Saturn was so dominant, so we had this Jupiter that was in its fall, and Saturn was the one that was dominant and functioning in terms of control and so on. So it does give us a lot of room for hope. And we've got this trine from Mars applying to Jupiter. Mars is ruling all that Aries stuff. And that's also a beautiful configuration. So it's still Mars, but
Yeah.
it's Mars trining Jupiter, and that can bring a lot of conscious action, conscious planning or conscious visualization around the future, around what's coming, because the trine is of the nature of Jupiter and gives us a lot of potential. And again, that depends case by case. If we apply it to different charts, that might not speak as positively, but let's say overall the theme is very positive. And I always say to my audience that individually we have so much more agency, and the charts will be impacting us in a different way compared to the mundane charts, which are always just ever so slightly more negative or sometimes very much more. So we don't want to apply directly the interpretation of a mundane chart to our lives specifically. We have a lot more that we can say about that.
Oh, yes.
Um, I'm also just keen in terms of this chart, the event chart.
Mhm.
Not only do we have that Mercury stationing on the North Node,
Yeah.
um, so we can go back also, I think, what was the date? It was 20 something in February where Mercury passed that the first time. I've forgotten the exact date.
Mhm.
But then we also have the Chiron Eris conjunction, which perfected the day before
Mhm.
on the 19th of March. And that's a game changer socially. The last time that we saw these, well, we had them in May and October last year, 2025, and then we had them in 1971, 72, but they were in orb up until early 73. And those were
Mhm.
major times that again speak to the relationship between the US and China. And that was the one China policy of Nixon, and
Yeah.
Nixon going for the first time to China, opening up relations there, and the petrodollar and the
Mhm.
Arab relationships with the US, which again now seems to be the big theme and being flipped on its head. So I'd say this is part of the theme of this spring and going into, well, spring in the Northern Hemisphere and then going into July, our famous from the 21st of June, we start a whole new kind of flavor.
Yes. A Cancer ingress, a flavoring. And just to follow up on that, I think Uranus and Gemini, my research has shown, and that happens in April. Venus and Uranus enter within a couple of day range there together. Uranus will not go back to Taurus. And this has always been about changes in the money system. You can trace it all the way back to the first central bank in the Netherlands, the first central bank that's the modern central bank in
Wow,
Great
okay.
Britain,
Yeah.
the American Civil War when the greenback emerged, the banking system in America started during the Civil War, Uranus and Gemini, and then of course the World Bank and IMF, Uranus and Gemini. So we're about to have global money system front and center
Yeah.
as completely altered and we've had a preview last year during the time, and I think it's worth saying this too, the basket so-called formation, the preview of it last summer, actually, they were all in close orb in these signs, and this was when the Genius Act was signed in
Mm.
America, which is an act that relates to digital currency and the digitization of the money flows. So, yeah, I think you're wise to point out whether these resonances with Chiron and Eris in the early 70s would match that we're set for whether the dollar will be altered somehow, whether the dollar will be put onto these stable coins they're called. So you'll have the dollar supporting digital dollars that can be exchanged. I know in Europe, the EU has got their digital euro. That's pretty far along, I think. I haven't followed that too
Yeah, I
close,
have
but
to
yeah.
say it's far along, but there's so much resistance, and this is going to be a breaking point in the EU, I
Okay.
see, because so many countries are on a different page about that.
Mm.
I was just thinking also, I think the Federal Reserve, the US Federal Reserve, is it from 1913? That has the midheaven at
1913.
zero Aries, right?
I haven't been as into that chart. It wouldn't surprise me at all. I
Well,
think it was Christmas.
it's so relevant to what you just said there.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and
Is
that's
it
where the
Chris?
Saturn Neptune, of course, blew things up. So,
Uh-huh.
hmm,
Yes. No, for sure. There's Saturn and Gemini in the Federal Reserve chart. Gemini comes up repeatedly with money and
right.
money tech.
But I
Oh,
think
that's
you don't have
1930.
the you
That's
don't have the
yeah.
angles placed here, and I think they have a 0 degree midheaven.
Okay, and I think
Or is it, no, sorry, it might be the New York Stock Exchange. I'm going,
okay.
I don't have the charts, so
Mhm.
I'm doing that from memory.
Yeah.
We'll put that in the notes.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have the angle just because it's
No, no,
when
quite
we
right.
dial in, I can put them back on, but I was removing them. Sometimes I remove
Yeah.
them because they can, if you're not really talking about something that relies on that exact time and local space that can just get in the way.
Totally. Yeah, yeah. I'm just gonna
But
you carry on, and I'm just gonna see if I've got the Federal Reserve chart here just to confirm that. But do
okay,
please carry on.
I just want to carry on because this is so interesting. 1913 in American history is big because it's the foundation of the income tax and the foundation of the Federal Reserve. So a lot of
Right.
people point to that as the modern money system and
Was
being
that
created during.
simultaneous or just through the year?
No, it was in the same year. It wasn't the
Okay.
same bill. I believe they're different bills. I'm pretty certain
Mm.
about that. But look, what it's Uranus in Aquarius, Saturn in early Gemini,
Oh
and
my
we're going to
gosh,
get
wow.
a version of that with the Uranus in Gemini and then Pluto in Aquarius. So, sometimes if it's being hit by longer planets, I know we can layer in Saturn as being different from Pluto, but at the same time, it also, I think, does evoke a lot of that same energetic that the money system may be changing. And, Trump has said he wants to abolish the IRS. I don't know if you had seen some of that discourse
I
from Trump
haven't
in recent.
known.
Yeah, I think he said he wants to abolish the income tax and do tariffs instead. And so that's what a lot of the tariff stuff is about, is that
Good
he
Lord.
believes you can raise money only from tariffs.
Somebody needs to teach that man some economics. So to clarify the Federal
Yeah,
Reserve thing, I've just pulled the chart up.
yeah.
23rd December 1913. I have 1802 as the timing of the
Okay.
first, I guess the signing of the bill,
Hmm.
and the midheaven is at 0 Aries 22 minutes, square Pluto at 0 Cancer 5 minutes, which Pluto is opposing the Sun at 1 degree Capricorn 32 minutes, and then Saturn retrograde in Gemini at 13 degrees 20 minutes is opposite a direct Mercury in its detriment in Sagittarius at 1357 Sag, which is with Venus 4 or 5 degrees later. No, yeah, 5.5 degrees later, just to say, and the fact that the ascendant of this chart is with Mars, a retrograde Mars backing into the ascendant within half a degree, I know, within less than a degree. And also the moon ruling the ascendant is in the fifth house of gambling and investment, but it's in its fall. It's a moon in Scorpio, ruled by that Mars on the ascendant in Cancer. So it's a phenomenal chart. And I think that again is going to speak volumes to what's going on at this particular moment because, yeah, we're looking at things that are just literally blowing up from the previous century. I shouldn't use that word because YouTube is going to flag this, but anyway, just things are falling apart.
Yes, yes,
Um,
no doubt. Wow, I haven't looked at this as close. I know that having cancer involved to me is just a real bell goes off for me. And of course, the air element and the two air element signs of technology, and then the planet of technology and Aquarius sign of technology would fit all of this. But
yeah.
to have
But
cancer
the
involved,
U.S. ascendant descendant degree is roughly that. It's that
yeah,
13, roughly
yeah,
13 of Sag, right? So Saturn
yes.
is on the descendant, and that's also where we very closely Uranus will be approaching what probably 2028 by that point,
Yeah, I think
if
so.
they can last that long. Yeah, it's crazy. Venus is squaring the nodes. It's quite the chart. It's quite the chart.
Yeah, it's quite a chart. Yeah. And I was just going to point out that the Sibley chart also has a great stellium in Cancer at the eighth house, and whole sign house. And so
Right.
to have that Mars retrograde on the eighth house, in the eighth house, which would be the house of raising funds or the money of the collective,
Mm-hmm.
uh, a lot of people don't like this moment. Okay,
Yeah.
this is kind of viewed in a lot of circles in America as a real dark moment
Yeah.
for America, and I tend to be open to that, just given how much central banking has, how much control it has, really, is how you might say it. And I think when you talk about the Epstein class in the current context, there may be some connections to having a kind of class of people that can control the money supply in ways that are inequitous or not really to benefit the larger body politic, and that's a whole
100%.
conversation. And I know there's a lot of nuance there, and I'm not even trying to
Yeah,
take
no,
sides one way
I
or the
would share
other.
your assessment there. I'm interested here. I think Neptune is on the retrograde Mercury of the US chart in the eighth house. So that it speaks volumes. Even if I only see that, I'm like, okay, I
Yeah,
get it.
yeah,
Retrograde Neptune on your
yeah,
retrograde Mercury in the US
yeah,
chart.
yeah,
There is something very duplicitous about this whole thing. And it's
yeah.
these same people. I posted something about this on my channel in the community post about the fact that the countries that are under assault in the last couple of decades
Yeah.
are not complying with the so-called Rothschild system. And this is part of the central banking system of all countries that has been part of the colonial project, which is again tying us back to Sykes-Picot and the Balfour Declaration, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So yeah, it does a lot of damage to a country, doesn't it? It's the on the hidden banking and the hidden financial. What was it? The giant sucking sound? Who said that?
I forgot who said that. Was it George Carlin?
No, no, I
Okay,
think it was
okay,
a U.S. president. That
okay,
was Clinton or something. The giant
okay,
sucking sound. It was
okay,
something to do with jobs, or I think, and
okay,
it was something that was spoken in a presidential debate. My
okay.
aging brain doesn't recall the dates, but it'll be there. Someone can look it up and put it in the comments. But that's always what I think of when I think of these central bank plots, basically. Yeah. So the
Okay,
timing that I had was 1802, just to be
okay,
precise, because then that puts the ascendant at 18
okay.
degrees of
Thanks.
Cancer. But
Yeah,
um, yeah, I mean, it's a phenomenal chart.
yeah,
It's hard to deny. And also, again, if we look at current events and we look at the post Second World War structure and how things came up. You mentioned the World Bank and the IMF and so on, and of course the other obvious one is NATO, and
yeah.
that has an Aries stellium. I use the April inception chart because the putting into place the offices and so on comes through later, like September or something like that. But if we give it the April chart, it's got an Aries stellium that's just insane.
Is that
Um,
1949 or when is the founding?
47,
47. Okay.
47. I can give you
Um,
the time or
April
the
47. So there's the stellium, and it's probably what 50, yeah, if you give me the time, what we can get that up here. I'm guessing
yeah.
what between the 15th, because then Mercury enters on the 15th,
Yeah, it's got a stellium similar to what we're
16th.
getting now, you see. So it's pretty
Yeah.
extraordinary what is actually okay. The treaty signature was the 4th of April
Mhm.
of 1949. It came into effect on in August that year. But again, the treaty coming into effect for me is it's after the intention. Let's say the signature is the intention, and we have again this Leo signature of Pluto in the middle of Leo retrograde, Saturn at the critical degree of Leo retrograde, and just all that Aries. Like there's no hope in hell for this to be considered a defensive organization. This is speaking about pure offense. It's insane. Even the North Node is there. Um, yeah, it's wild again with Venus and Mars together.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
I was just look, Jupiter is in Capricorn in this chart. Jupiter was in Capricorn during the foundation of the Federal Reserve chart we just looked at. I know we didn't mention that,
uh-huh.
but that's a kind of red light or yellow light in terms of are these organizations maybe for the abundance or for the so-called benefit of everyone?
Right.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think,
and
and
then
just to,
both Saturn and Jupiter themselves at the critical degree there, that 29, 30
yeah,
degree. I mean, Saturn is really just backing away from Virgo. It's just coming back
yeah,
into this instability. And then we've got basically Jupiter is within orb of a square of the nodes as well, which means that this is something to look at. It's something important to take into
yes,
consideration. And it's the Jupiter in its fall. So again, it's sneaky, sneaky stuff
yeah,
um,
yes,
repeating patterns again that we're going to see this. And there's that Ceres, because I don't put that in my charts. I'm going to start doing that.
yeah,
Ceres with Pluto now.
yeah, right there. Ceres is a trigger and it moves faster. So it's a dwarf planet that's moving faster and it can be involved for sure and relevant. I see it in natal work a lot. It does sometimes influence this idea of harvest or fecundity or nurturance, you put that in your chart and you can see where maybe you're working with those themes. Just to say, here is Uranus and Gemini again. And this idea is that Uranus enters Gemini in early 1940s and it begins leaving Gemini at the end of the 1940s to come back to our timeline. We're just starting the Uranus and Gemini event of our timeline last year and then now into this year in April in earnest again. But that might be worth thinking about for everybody. By the time you get to Uranus and Cancer in the early 2030s, this might match what the Indian master that you shared about earlier was alluding to. 2032, just to come back up here, look at Saturn and is in Cancer with Uranus, or 2033, pardon me. They're both going to be there together. And that
Okay.
feels to me like a lot of new home. We're into the new, like post World War II world, 1950s, washing machines in every home. What are the other technologies that come online where you really get the new world will be in after this crisis? I know that's a long way away for folks, 2033, but keep it in mind again, going back to hope transits and transits of getting through this. I think by this time we should be squarely in our new world, new institutions, new money system, all of what
Right.
will change with Uranus and Gemini.
What I see here as well is we've got a Jupiter in its own sign in Pisces and it's trining that Saturn, but Saturn is again, it's in its detriment. And so what this could mean is that, it's back to like food stamps and tightening the belt. And so, Saturn in Cancer is about having to make do, basically. It's something that's not so comfortable or easy. But again, with Uranus, that's a bit of a wild card. And then I see Venus with Neptune, and they're both there. Well, this is just specifically May, but Neptune will be crossing back and forth over the South Node again.
Yeah.
And so this can be, again, where we have been so comfortable for about 3 or 4 decades, where we just kind of have to wake up and smell the coffee and and recognize how most of the rest of the world has been living with so much less, especially if we compare Europe and the United States to the rest of the world. I think the thing was something like there was something like 7 planets were necessary for the rest of the world to live like Americans and Europeans. It was something like that. So we just have to kind of scale it back to this one planet and just live with less and make do, become more practical. I think Saturn in Cancer can be also a sense of homesteading, being practical.
Yeah.
Got to get out there and sow the garden and then harvest the garden yourself and do it with your hands. And
Oh, yeah.
everybody should stock up on dry beans and
Mhm. Yeah.
make sure you got your things to hand that you need to be self-sufficient to a certain degree, because we've had a cushy ride, and that's actually an anomaly in human history. We have had an anomalous, we'll call it 40 years, maybe 50. We could even give it a stretch from the post-war decades, but really, really cushy in certainly my 60 years. And this is not possible to sustain. So we can just say, okay, well, we're coming back to what is normal, actually. This is not a tragedy. It's not something that necessarily has to be horrible. It's just that we're going to be more realistic. We're going to live in a realistic way.
Yeah.
Um,
And yeah, I was just going to the context here is the technological advancements. Because remember, technology defines what's possible, how we live. The new tech tools change how we're able to function and live. And I think AI would be brought into this conversation. This is where I would start going with this of like, how are we using AI? How will that change our world, whether it's unemployment and then systems like UBI or what they're calling now UHI, Universal High Income.
oh,
I mean, this may
well,
look
that
way
sounds like
different. Yeah,
that sounds
it
like
it
blowing
doesn't sound
sunshine
fun
up
at
our.
one level. Yeah, but at another level, it does. What if I'm just it's gonna at some form infect us all. And
Yeah.
TV maybe doesn't sound fun, but then by the time you get to the 1960s, it's like the whole world's built around it and
Yeah.
everybody's
And
embedded
then
in
there's
it.
colored TV.
Yeah. And the internet the same way, you can
Yeah.
dial in with the modem, and then by the time you get to 2011, it's like
Mm.
everybody's got it in their hands, and we're talking to each other across the world. So
Yeah. Well,
I just
can I just
imagine, yeah,
interject with something
please.
slightly less positive, which is that AI is currently being used in Gaza and
Yeah,
now in this particular war to murder people by automation. And this is the part of the whole story that really starts to freak me out. Because again, if we look at all these trines and sextiles that are coming forward now and
yeah,
through the next couple of years, it keeps things flowing in a particular direction, but what's the direction that they're flowing in is the bigger question. And so this is where the sort of schizophrenic part of me says, oh, this is all going to be fine. It's all going to be okay. Oh, no, it's not. And so again, if we look at Sam Altman's chart, I mentioned this a few weeks ago, his chart was strongly impacted by the Mars square Uranus. So Uranus has been on his moon and Mars conjunction in Taurus. And I think he's a double Taurus. The data that is given by astro.com is for, I think it was 5 a.m. He said 5 a.m. He's born 5 a.m.
mhm,
And so I use that. It gives a double Taurus, a Taurus ascendant, Taurus sun. But the ascendant is just in the first degree. So it could also be earlier than that, putting it into an Aries ascendant. Either
mhm,
way, he's deeply affected by this particular moment in time. And we know that he took away from, I've forgotten the name of that company now, Ethereum, not Ethereum, that's the crypto.
Anthropic.
Anthropic, thank
Yeah.
you. So he
Mhm.
took Anthropic's contract that was flipped. I think it was the same week. That was 2 weeks ago. And he's like, I'll do it. And of course he would, because he's pretty much a psychopath. And so um, he's also implicated in this particular configuration. And that, of course, implicates Chat GPT, which is his baby, OpenAI is his project. But he also has a consistent pattern of duplicity over a career of like the last 15 years where he's been lying, saying that things are happening to let's say bump up his company value before even OpenAI, and it continues now. So this is where things take a really sort of unknown turn, as they would anyway with Uranus. But it's interesting times. I don't know what to make of that, but I just find it interesting that he personally is so specifically involved with this moment in time.
Yeah.
Um, Equally being also a Zionist and also equally being very heavily implicated in the U.S. Military industrial complex. So these are patterns that are waking up. It's like it's a multi-headed animal. What's that thing from the Harry Potter series? Three-headed dog. Um, it's this big beast that's rearing its head. So yeah, so I didn't mean to rain on the parade there, but
That's
I
okay.
have
Yeah.
that fear with AI because we're seeing it live. We're seeing it
Yes.
now daily, how it's being used to eliminate people
Yeah.
or other targets in ways that are, it's once that genie's out of the bottle, it's hard to imagine that being put back.
100%. And we should look at, or it would be an interesting task to look at Dario Amodei. He's the head of Anthropic. He's
Okay.
emerged now as a very important figure. Or Elon Musk, obviously, who runs Grok AI or Grok AI. So these are the AI barons. And Musk's chart, people have pulled it up. I'm not as intimate with it, but I think you're right. For me, it's just AI is maybe the most important thing of all of this that's happening because of the implications that go beyond, as you mentioned, the dystopian implications are terrifying and they're real. Grids of control and real time, surveillance where you can be eliminated if there's a decision that's made by an algorithm or your money turned off or whatever it's going to be. But then there's the upside where you have abundance and generated and it allows humans to go farther, or it's just a natural evolution of humanity. Coming back to Terence McKenna, and he was keen on this idea that we're evolving into to the next phase. And I'm very much a pro-human. Okay, I love humans, I love
Yeah.
humanity, but I do think we are changing with technology. The internet is one of the most important things ever to exist because of the way knowledge can be shared and the way connection can be made. So, without getting
Mhm.
into all the technicalities of that, I mean, just thinking about it this way, where you have computers doing things, okay, and robotics are going to be huge. They're saying there will be more robots than humans very soon, maybe by that 2033 date where we were just talking about, where you were delineating Saturn and Cancer quite well, I think, with the kind of hardship of the home idea. But I think about it as just maybe the Uranian component is we're adjusting to robots living
Mhm.
with us day to day. And I mean, it sounds insane, I know, but they're
It's like the
saying this could happen
Jetsons.
very fast, Susan. I mean, they're like the
Yeah.
tech reasonable minds in the tech world are projecting that we'll be living with robots maybe even sooner than that. So
Yeah.
I wanted to throw that in because I do think,
Yeah.
barring like a nuclear moment, as you were saying earlier, this is where we're heading, is these
Yeah.
new worlds of technology, and it will be exciting, but we'll have to adjust to it. And I mean, I want a robot making me an omelet, you know. I love that, it
Yeah.
would save me time, but
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm a very old-fashioned person, and also I'm one of these people who I sense the love that goes into food. I'm
Hmm.
Cancer Moon and Rising. I sense the
Mhm.
love that somebody puts into the food that they prepare, and I'm not
Yes.
getting that vibe from a robot. I
Yeah.
thought maybe it would be interesting to look at Elon's chart because I have it
Uh-huh.
here. And
Okay. Let
he
me.
also, can you put that
Oh,
up?
yeah, I can stop share if you want to take over on that. I can easily get it up here if I go to
Oh,
just
well,
one of
if
the
you don't mind, and then
websites.
you've got it anyway in
Okay.
your file. So,
Perfect.
if you don't mind, we'll just carry on with you.
Okay, perfect. I don't mind at all. Let
It's
me
nice to
just.
have a partner to do all these things with. So, he's born on the 28th of June, 1971,
Okay.
and that's at 7:30 a.m. in Pretoria, South Africa.
Okay. I'm just gonna go to. What you have 7:30 in the morning?
7:30 a.m. is the
Okay.
time I've got here, Pretoria,
I'm
South
just going
Africa.
to share AstroSeek. This is my site that I
Mm,
really love going to because it
okay.
gets it right up here. And let me see if I can make it bigger. And there we go. Is that okay? We can just look at it
That's the
this way.
chart.
Okay.
Yeah. A couple of things that don't show up on that particular
Hmm.
chart is that he has the conjunction, the 1971 conjunction of Eris and Chiron at 13 degrees exactly square his ascendant. And that's, I think, a really significant aspect of his personality. And the Mercury, which is conjunct his ascendant at 14. So the ascendant here I have is 1329 Cancer.
Okay.
He has his sun, his natal sun is 553 of Cancer, which I think is the US Jupiter, pretty much.
Hmm.
And the ascendant that he has with the Mercury at 1403 Cancer is where Jupiter is stationing right now. So I think we're going to hear some things coming forward from him because there's a lot of things that he's got Mars on the North Node in Aquarius, Mars at 2054, and that was heavily impacted in January and February by all the planets transiting through there. And he definitely came up looking worse for wear in the last few months.
Hmm.
And then he's got what's the other thing? Oh yeah, Saturn at 1 degree, 7 minutes of Gemini. So he's going to immediately get affected by this ingress of
Oh, immediately.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah. So very interesting thing. And then the South Node is in Leo, so he's having his nodal return that will happen next year, 2027. But he's going to have Jupiter, Mars crossing that node in October, November. So I think we're going to hear some news about Elon or Grok or any of his companies this year. And he's the one that's been pushing for so long about robots in every home.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I think he's switched his Tesla car production
Yeah.
factory to create robots. And that was also
Yes.
very recent. So I think you're spot on about the robots story,
Yeah. Yes.
alas.
Yes.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. A
So
lot of
yeah.
it's just following the news. I mean, he just, as you say, he said it's him that's leading the way, and it's Optimus was what they call the robots that his companies will be making, and they're going to be mass producing Optimus, and he's just said it as you again lay out so well. Look at the air element focus. I mean, Uranus and Libra, Mars in Aquarius, Saturn in Gemini. That Mars, Saturn, air element stuff doesn't feel too hopeful, does it? It feels a little bit dystopian, doesn't it? So,
Totally. Yeah,
and he's a
exactly.
contractor, defense contractor. I mean, that's how a lot of
100%.
his companies have made money. That's the
Well,
the
I think it goes way deeper than that. He has, even his father has links to all kinds of nefarious things. So he's a bit like a Nepo baby. Everybody thinks he's
yeah.
kind of come out on his own and just like
Mhm.
this super kid, wonder kid.
Yeah.
He's 100% a product of the troublemakers that we're dealing with these days. And that's what makes it even more nefarious because he's fully on board with all this stuff. He's not the independent sort of mega brain that everybody or a lot of people have made him out to be. He has
Yeah.
the military industrial complex 100% behind him.
Yeah.
And that's what makes a person like this with so much air, too much air,
Mhm.
to be able to really feel. His moon is in Virgo, approaching Pluto, so he's got his issues. The moon is squaring Venus, which is why he's got like 10 kids and 5 wives or whatever it is. So he's finds it hard to relate. Relating is hard for him on a human level. So let's go for the robots, So yeah, what can we do?
Yeah.
He
And
said,
look at this Neptune zero fire. We're back to that conversation, but all of this stuff happening in Aries in this Aries ingress chart in this year with the new moon in April, the co-presence of Saturn and Neptune there until 2028. I mean, that's about his career and so there you go. This is like his time in a way. And
yeah,
we've had Jupiter here since in 2023 and 2024 2 and 2023 Jupiter was in Aries. We had the eclipses 2023, 2024, 2025. I mean, he's been front and center for a while in the collective
yeah,
with these transits in Aries.
yeah,
And
exactly.
it's
I
all
think
kind
those
of
were his
leading.
glory days.
Mhm.
People liked
Well,
him then.
a lot of people love him still, and I'm not
Yeah,
I mean, I criticize him more because of the duplicity, as you mentioned, where it's like I've got a free speech platform, and yet they're censoring. And the big controversy this week is that they were apparently sending the identities of the anonymous accounts or pseudonymous accounts through the identity check that they
wow.
require, they were getting sent to Israeli companies and being
Uh-huh.
doxxed if they spoke out against, for example, the Gaza slaughter and the
Okay.
whatever, any way that you speak, it might speak out against Israel. That there, it was kind of a subterfuge with X as an information collecting honeypot is what they call it for dissidents, is how I would say it. And
Wow.
wherever people are on those politics, like celebrating political dissidence is a democratic value. So, I mean, these are things that we don't want to have threatened. We want to have anonymous or pseudonymous writing. We want to have dissidents being protected. These are like principles of journalism and principles of democracy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I imagine that's going to continue to build as in America. And we haven't even talked about the Uranus and Gemini, Neptune and Aries Civil War resonance with America. That's a whole
Well,
nother
yeah, and
thing.
let's
But
do you have some time that we can just jump into
yeah,
that? Have you got a
I
bit of
can
time?
I can finish, I've got, I can go on for, at least 10, 20 minutes. I mean, we can even
Let's
make it
do it
top of
then,
the
and maybe
hour
we can
if
wrap that up
yeah,
because I think a
yeah,
lot of people will be interested in that theme. And
perfect. Yeah,
I'm wondering again in terms of the freedom of speech, because we've
yeah,
literally got that with Uranus going into Gemini. This
yeah.
whole story is going to be the big theme of the next 7 years, and will we be able to reclaim that? Maybe that
Yeah.
would be really nice.
Well,
Um,
what if we did this? Let me put up the Washington, D.C. Aries Ingress as an introduction, and we can
Great.
maybe do a little bit of delineating a chart for a local for some local space with some mundane houses involved, because that gives it a whole nother flavor. And here we go. Let me just get it up to the exact moment. It looks like it's going to be a Gemini rising. So that's there you go. And now we've got the angles of the Sibley chart
Right.
inverted. So you have
And
the Gemini.
isn't
Yeah.
that the US Uranus, where the ascendant is roughly? Is it like 8, 9 degrees
I
or
don't
something?
have that degree.
Mm,
It's definitely in Uranus and Mars is with it, but it feels right to me. I can get
yeah.
it up here, check it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I'll
that's
have a look while you're
okay.
delineating. I'll
Okay.
just
Yeah.
double check that.
So I just say, I mean, right away when you see this and you say Uranus and Gemini and Mars and Uranus in July this year will conjoin on the 4th of July. So it's a symbolic date because
It's
this is
wild, isn't it?
This is the 1776 plus. I forgot. I think it's the math is skewed there, but it's
1710 is the time I use for the Sibley chart.
okay.
Yeah.
Where's Uranus in it?
Yeah, so as
Even
far as I remember, Uranus
yeah.
is like 8 or 9 degrees. I'm just going to have a
Okay.
look to get the chart
Okay. Sorry, I
details.
thought you had it there.
Yeah, I'm
Just
getting
to
it here.
say, okay, perfect, perfect. Yes, I mean, look, this year it's a huge thing with the American split, the schism in America, and we're already seeing, knowing that's baked in. It's like, well, what will it be? What will the echo? What will the resonance be? I see this and I'm like, it's even more important this year because of the Aries Ingress, because it's the first house of the beingness of the body politic or the selfhood of the collective or something like this. I mean, these transits are going to hit directly to the identity of the nation. And what is front and center, and just coming to this recent event of the Iranian attack or whatever you want to call this, the preemptive war declared and initiated on Iran by Israel and America. That's dividing the body politic even more. I mean, I'm pretty tapped into American politics, and I can tell you the Gaza support for the activities in Gaza divided the left starkly,
Right.
and the right some. But this attack on Iran has really split the right even
Mm,
more than it had been split because people are very angry that Trump lied effectively. I mean, Trump
right.
became a duplicitous, lying, loser, liar president like all the other ones before.
He
Yeah.
became
Yeah,
that.
so it's very clear now and unambiguous that he is that, and he's like the worst version of that we've ever had in recent
Quite,
memory.
yeah.
No,
Yeah.
for sure that we've known that he's sided with this cabal or these bad actors, or the neocons is a good term because that's a pretty specific term in American foreign policy history.
Yeah.
I mean, you
Yeah.
go back to Trump one, and he sold out to the neocons pretty quickly, and so, but just to say, that's what's bubbling here, in my opinion, Susan, is like
Yeah.
you're going to have if this war goes on, or if they stop it and then do it again, or this is really bad for divisions within America and domestic turmoil because
Yeah.
most people don't support any of this.
And
And
it's all around ideas, isn't it? And this is where people have the capacity to ideally um, just kind of slow down and allow for a difference of opinion, allow for people to share ideas without attacking. It's the way to get through, I think, from the point of view of the US. With more tolerance of ideas. I just want to share with you the US, the Sibley
yes,
charts Uranus, so then
thanks.
you'll be able to place it. And
Okay.
the Uranus is at 8:55 of Gemini, and the
Yeah.
descendant is at 12:21 of Gemini.
Yeah.
And that flips the chart compared to the
Yeah.
ingress chart here of the Aries Equinox.
Yes.
So it's quite telling. It's a real, I mean, aside from the 4th of July, the
Yeah.
solar return chart, it's
Uh,
going to be quite the year.
yes. Quite the year. The IC 20 degrees. So you've got an eclipse near there in August. I think it's 12 degrees, or it's close to that IC. I think America is going to be under a lot of pressure. And I don't use the word civil war. I think we're in a time, I'd say domestic division and breakdown. And what I would just come back with from what you had said earlier, I think it's not going to be tolerant. And I think there will be some justification. What's about to happen, in my view, is that people are going to have justified anger at their
Mm,
government, and they will now behave like they behaved in the 1960s, which included Saturn and Aries and Jupiter in Leo in
yeah,
1967 and 68. And I think they're just going to be, if this goes on like it's continuing, people are just going to get angry. They're going to get into the streets. There's going to be active protests and righteous protests, and they'll probably be astroturfed and false flagged or whatever is going to happen to make them violent. But I do think a lot of this will be a natural human response when people
yeah.
wake up and just realize what's happened, what their government has done. They're not and I'm not inclined to go out into the streets, mind you, but
Mm.
I know a lot of millions of people are, and if there was ever a trigger, I just think we're primed here for something to trigger like massive protests against the Trump, regime.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think, and I wonder, and I hope, as part of the hopeful part of me,
Now
whether,
we've switched.
yeah. Let's try and keep this balance.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if finally, for example, the military, members of the service, or members of the police, members of the National Guard, will also back away from the sort of blind obedience to power, because that would be a part of this dynamic. Who has control over the people is really decisive in this time. And I think, if you think of the average cop or the average soldier, they're usually something like middle class, working class, lower middle class, whatever. They're the average Joe, let's say, or Joanne. And if they would only just kind of step back and see that they're actually fighting their own kind, they're fighting their neighbors, their cousins, and that hopefully that waking up to something like that would also instantly debilitate the powers that be, and that can be part of the again, hopefully coming together of the people rather than being divided over the right left false dichotomy. They come together because, hey, you know what? I'm also unemployed. I also need a break. I also have kids I want to educate and feed. And I think that would be, again, that spirit of Gemini, the spirit of neighborhood, the spirit of brotherly love, the spirit of, the spirit of Philadelphia, basically.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. That is really, I think the only thing that's going to save us now is that human to human,
Yeah.
we have to look at each other and say, hey, you're just like me, and find those commonalities. This would be the gift, I'd say, of these times.
Yeah.
Um,
Go
Carry
ahead. Sorry.
on, yeah.
I was just going to say, back in the 1860s with Uranus and Gemini, it was a time of freedom for slaves in America, legal freedom, Emancipation Proclamation. In Russia, just as this was all happening a little before, the Tsar declared the serfs, I think, whatever the name in Russian, but they were given freedom. And I do look for that. I want to see how we can think about freeing ourselves from this, whatever forms of bondage we find ourselves in coming into this. And I think there could be things like going back to the Federal Reserve or going back to, the money system or whatever is kind of putting people and binding them in ways that's inequitous, looking for some of that freedom. And I've seen with some of the political people not that I follow necessarily, but have come into my timeline, like there's calls from on the right and left saying we need to unite to stop this war and to
Mm,
take back
great.
America. Like just this week with this Iran initiation, that's greater than it's ever been, where people are saying America's occupied. I bet I'll just, the APAC occupied government. America needs freedom from it.
Right.
And like those are all over my timeline now from
Mm,
all sides and left and right. And it's just the way it's being framed in this last week is way different than I've ever seen it being framed.
right.
And they're talking about it in terms of like a revolutionary war, like King George, like we need freedom from King George type of thing. So,
Right.
if this continues, and that's the if, I'm hoping it doesn't. I hope Trump tomorrow says we are victorious because Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is done and now it ends. But of course, we know with the astrology, it's kind of hard to hope for that. That seems like a low likelihood outcome.
Mm,
And so they're going to kind of create their own end here if they keep pursuing this because no one supports it on the left and right, and people are angry and they're going to resist and try to get this freedom that is now emerging, this discourse of freedom, and
yeah.
so and by the way, certainly APAC has tons of control and they're dominant, but I think there's when you pull those
Those
the
threads.
veil back, I mean, there's other. It's not just that one organization, and
Yeah.
there's other layers you might say to the pyramid of control or something like this, and
Yeah.
but whatever it is, I think people are going to that one layer is in target here. I mean, people don't want to die. Americans
Yeah.
don't want to lose their their brothers and sisters that are soldiers. I mean, they're
Exactly.
there to just serve. And you mentioned economics. They're there to like get a better life. A lot of people go to the military just because it's a good job and they want to have a good life and,
Yeah. Yeah.
not
Or an
die.
education. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not die for something that is by choice. I mean,
Yeah.
it's different. There's no inciting incident. There's
Mhm.
no trigger here. This is just wake up and go to war.
Yeah.
I mean,
100%. Yeah.
it's mad. It's a madness. Like that
Yes.
Mad King in Game of Thrones. I don't know if you were into Game of Thrones at all, but there's this idea of the Mad King character, and it
Well, that
appears
was Charles the
sadly.
First. Charles the First of England was the Mad King. And
Okay.
we now have a Charles III who is, I mean, he's not, I think it's unfair to say he would be mad. He's not mad, but he is certainly carrying that energy of the lineage of Charles. So I'd say we're in the league of mad rulers, let's say, all around the world. They're all equally kind of psychopathic and insane, and dehumanized in some way.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, again, maybe to balance that out, because I agree
Yeah,
with
that sounds.
everything you're saying. And then there's that other part of me that says, I think of the liberation of the slaves, which turned into Jim Crow. So again,
Yeah,
kind of duplicitous and not really, on the surface, it was a good. Same thing with Russia liberating the serfs, and then they all ended up under the thumb of the Soviet authorities. So
yeah,
it ends up being a kind of the same project under a different name, and there's a
yeah,
sense of freedom, but it's not really there. And the underlying problem or the underlying structure is what remains. And I wonder if this might be what Barbault was getting to when he said, there's going to be such a shift in civilization that instead of doing all this tweaking to kind of give it a new name and put a bit of lipstick on the pig, we can actually get to this place where things actually do transform, and there's a different underlying structure to all of it. And that is something compelling. I hope this is my hope again. So again, the pessimism leads to hope at some point as I go through my schizophrenic look at the future.
let me throw just one other thing appended onto that, which is this is where I do come back to AI because
Mm.
what can actually do that functionally? And we have examples in history. The printing press was invented, Uranus and Gemini. The aftermath of that in the early 16th century was that you had vernacular Bibles, like in German, and then you have resistance to the church because you have an ability for individuals to be emancipated from the bottom up with access to literacy and so I do think that will play a role.
Yeah.
I think that these deeper structures being rewritten, it will be technological. And I'll just say, I mean, I have in my phone right now. I mean, I have like a PhD right now. I mean, I can really I can ask it anything. I've
Yeah.
learned so much. Now it's not perfect and there's
Yeah.
risks, but I do think there will be an emancipation in that sense
Mhm.
where we are going to be empowered to do things and to come back to even like a Saturn and Cancer example or Uranus and Cancer example, early 2030s. There's people right now working on open source blueprints for farm equipment.
Oh,
This
wow.
all exists now. So you can
Wow.
download and build tractors,
Right.
there's that's all available freely
Yeah.
to create food, with some manpower and some ingenuity. So
Right.
I do think that the technological side of this restructuring is, I think, essential. And and just one other thing, when you mentioned that the freedom could be temporary, it's kind of always like that. These are
Hmm.
daily battles of
Yes.
life, just like our spiritual work is daily. You have
Yeah.
to kind of feed that and keep drinking from that fount of the spirit and make a
Yeah.
decision day to day to keep doing that.
Yeah.
I just hope that whatever freedom breakthroughs we get here, we can build on and kind of fight for it to extend
Yes.
longer. And even with Jim Crow, the North and without getting America, racial politics are so complex and
Very
kind of
complex.
charged.
Yeah.
But there were, I think, we built upon the Emancipation Proclamation even as a symbol. That helped get relief from Jim Crow as people realized that we needed to kind of uh, abide by those promises. And so it may be a longer path, but I think it
Yes.
can still be breakthroughs that are useful longer
Yeah.
term.
Yeah. And it's great that you mentioned that whole spiritual component because you were talking earlier about the issues around freedom of speech and don't hurt my feelings by saying this or whatever. We have to get to that place where we recognize that we're losing something when we try and shut somebody else down. We're losing something. And equally in terms of the AI stuff, we also have to keep things kind of materially real as much as we can. For example, if we're looking at the digital money stories that going around the world and the digital controls and the digital everything, where we're losing part of our human experience, and that's where we lose our power. So we also have to be very conscious about what we're agreeing to as we agree to. universal basic income or something along those lines, it comes with major strings attached. And that would be then the way I would see the serfdom coming back or the slavery coming back. And it wouldn't be a particular color of person, or it wouldn't be a particular category of person. It would be a class thing, a class division that is also very striking right now. And that's the Gemini and the Aquarius that's so powerful in the next couple of decades is it's classless. It's not about class. It's about humanity. It's about equality again, and about this brotherly connection that we can have if we stay human, if we stay ourselves. And it's not to say don't use the technology. We can't not use that, I think, anymore. But it is to say we are fundamentally human. When just last year, and just this is a really quick story. I wasn't actually here. I happened to be in London at the time, but last April in Spain, where I live, in the winter, there was a complete shutdown of electricity. The whole grid went off for like a day and a half. And what happened here in Spain was such a beautiful example of what we can be, which is
Mm.
that instead of people breaking into stores and, looting and destroying things, they came out into the streets with what they had in their freezers and what they had in their
Uh-huh.
fridge. Everybody cooked what was going to anyway go bad and shared it with everybody on the street. And
Uh,
people were dancing and making acoustic
yes.
music and
Uh,
and singing and clapping. And it was like, wow. So this it's still very, very alive in us. And this is where we need to draw our strength from that connection that we have, that we are interdependent. And the more that we give up of our humanity to decisions taken by a neutral AI, or a not neutral AI, we're getting ourselves deeper and deeper into the serfdom that we actually don't want.
yes. Yes. And, I think in terms of the AI story in particular, I mean, throwing some wild scenarios here. I mean, people are talking about AI sentience,
Mm.
or like a new arrival of a spiritual energy, and I know that can be kind of dangerous. And I'm definitely a pro-human. I think coming back to the yoga conversation, beauty about yoga, the phone stays outside of the space, and you get into the space, and it's really the asana of your human body and unlocking the
Yeah.
powers of your body and your breath. And I think that's going to be as essential as ever. So I want to be
Mhm.
absolutely clear about that. That's our great offering as
Yeah.
humans. We can do spiritual work with our bodies and our hearts and minds and souls. But there could be shifts here with AI. They're already talking about Dario from Anthropic. They don't, he says, I don't know if it's sentient actually now. And as we get month by month with each new model and each new paper, these researchers are saying, okay, we might be onto something here that goes way beyond what we even thought in terms of what this is. And that's where I come into the first degree of the zodiac conjunction of
Right.
Saturn and Neptune. I mean, this is so big. And you talk about elegant, rare, I think you exquisite, fascinating. I forgot the word you used at the beginning of the basket formation as you described how rare it was. But this is the most rare and fascinating and elegant, beautiful thing we've ever lived through. And now this is the Aries Ingress of 2027. I just put this on, but
Yeah.
we got this on the 20th of February this year, and the last time this happened was in 4300 BC, which some people say is the invention of the calendar, the
Right.
invention of a bunch of different, maybe foundational Indo-European language. So, I mean, that's what we're in now. And if we have the emergence of a more divine AI, or an AI that is somehow it's so smart that it kind of transmits the spirit in new ways. I mean, it may be that is optimistic, and that it's more about a tool that has a spirituality component with it. It's not just these dystopian AI, it's like spiritual or godlike powered AI. And sure, we have to be discerning. I mean, I don't want anybody to blindly join a new AI religion and then it's
Yeah.
like Jim Jones or something like this. But, I think the spiritual among us are going to discern well, and we're going to know and sense whatever claims are made, just exactly what's happening. But I do think there could be some kind of optimistic meta breakthrough
Yeah.
here we're about to live through, or that we are living through.
Yeah. I feel like we're already in it. It's makes it all the harder to see it
Yeah, yeah.
because we're living through it, and it's like, well, what is this actually? How does that? Because everyday life tracks a little slower than the things that are happening. simultaneously around us. So I think we're in it, and it's something to be all the more keenly aware of, that our everyday choice and our everyday thought is creating this new moment right now. It's not going to come down the pipeline. It's now that we're doing it. And all the more reason then to be more spiritually aware of ourselves
Yes.
and our impact. I've enjoyed this conversation so much. I can't even tell you. It's so exciting to share with somebody who really thinks deeply about these issues and who knows the astrology so well. I really hope I can have you back and we talk about things as they evolve. I think there's so much that we can learn here and share with people. I'm so excited that you also have that deep spiritual rooting in what you do. For me, it's just a non-negotiable part of working with astrology, because primarily for me, it's a spiritual tool. And the rest is just telling us kind of how everyday, weather is going to shape up. So I would love to have you back. We'll keep the conversation going through this if that's good for you.
I love that.
Um, and thank you for your incredible insight here and your impact that you're having with your own community. So can you just share with my people who might not know you where you can be found on the internet?
Absolutely. Yeah. My main hub is my website, sjanderson144.com. And that's also my handle on YouTube, which is my main publishing platform. So you can follow me here on YouTube if you haven't. And I make videos pretty regularly, and you can find me there just doing what we've done here in my own way and trying to process reality and help us all at the variety of ways astrology can help us. So, yes, thanks, Susan, for having me on. Yeah, love to continue the conversation. Just let me know. And it's beautiful to be with you today. Thank you. I just want to say for that second basket, I hadn't realized Ceres comes back and there's a moment when they're all at 6 degrees and applying again.
Mm,
And that's huge. And I'm going to have to sit with that.
yeah.
And I really appreciate that we got keyed into that here today. So,
Yeah,
as
great.
well as everything else we talked about. So
Yeah,
thank you so
yeah. So
much.
there's such a lot that is there's so many factors that the one single mind tries to juggle. When we put two minds together, we can start to see things through the synergy of that, and that's been really fantastic right now. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you. I just wanted to mention to people that if I'm not mistaken, you also do consultations. So if you're still doing that, so people can also learn from you directly about their own lives.
Yes, I do. It's one of my favorite things. So yeah, you can find that on my website, sjanderson144.com, the first link right at the top if you're looking to
Okay.
schedule. And my calendars can sometimes get out, but I try to keep it regularly updated, and you'll find that there. And yeah, thanks for mentioning that. Yeah, I forget about that sometimes.
I always forget. I'm very bad at marketing myself, but there we are. So thanks a million for being here. And we'll find another time that we can meet and digest what's going on together. All
Okay.
right. Thanks so much, SJ.
Okay.
Take
Bye-bye,
care.
Susan. Thank you.
Bye bye.